Welcome to Infinite Universe with interesting episode. The world was in shock when news spread that legendary Hollywood actor Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Orokowa, were found dead inside their Santa Fe home. What made it even more chilling was the fact that they had already been dead for weeks before anyone even noticed. As the police began to investigate what had happened, they discovered some very strange and unsettling signs. It seemed like someone had known about their deaths long before anyone else did. All eyes turned toward Hackman's daughter, Leslie Ann, who quickly became the center of attention. People began to ask difficult questions. Was she involved in something more serious than anyone had imagined? Was she hiding something? And how far was she willing to go to keep the truth from coming out? When the police arrived at the couple's house, the atmosphere was strange. Everything was still. The front door was left slightly open, and a stack of unopened mail sat outside, showing that no one had been inside for a long time. A neighbor had grown concerned and finally called the authorities to check in. When officers entered the house, they expected to find someone ill or maybe just someone who needed help. But what they discovered was far more disturbing. Gene Hackman was found near the kitchen, slumped in a strange position. His sunglasses lay on the floor next to him as if they had just slipped from his hands. In a nearby bathroom, Betsy Orokowa's body was found surrounded by scattered pills. The sink was dry with a thin film of residue left behind, as if the water had evaporated over time. There was no blood, no forced entry, and no signs of a struggle. The couple's 2 dogs were found roaming the house alive and well, but a third dog had died inside its crate. It was clear that Gene and Betsy had been dead for quite a while. Their skin had begun to tighten and shrink, and decomposition had slowed to the point of mummification. The air in the house was stale and unmoving. Rotten food sat out on the counter, untouched. The entire scene felt like time had stopped. But the most haunting question remained: how could 2 people, especially someone as famous as Gene Hackman, be dead for so long without anyone noticing? Investigators discovered a crucial clue from Hackman's pacemaker. These medical devices can sometimes store data about the heart's activity. Hackman's pacemaker recorded its final action on February 17. That meant they had been dead for at least 9 days before being found. During that time, there were no emergency calls made, no attempts to reach out. No visitors. No contact. And still, many things didn't make sense. Why was Betsy found in a different room from Gene? If he had collapsed first, why didn't she call for help? If she was still alive when he died, what stopped her from seeking help or leaving the house? Questions piled up. The partially open door hinted at the possibility that someone might have entered or exited the house before police arrived. Could someone else have been there during those 9 days? Had someone left that door open on purpose? Toxicology reports revealed there was no sign of carbon monoxide poisoning or overdose. In fact, there was no clear medical cause of death at all. That's when investigators uncovered something even more bizarre. They found evidence that the couple's home had been under surveillance in the weeks leading up to their deaths. Security cameras in the area picked up odd activity around the property. Someone had been monitoring the house. There were unexplained movements, strange patterns on GPS tracking, and unusual data from phone records. It appeared that someone already knew what had happened before the police arrived. All the strange digital clues pointed to one surprising suspect, Gene Hackman's daughter, Leslie Ann. As the investigation shifted focus, inconsistencies began to appear in Leslie Ann's statements. She claimed she had spoken with her father just weeks before his death, but phone records did not support her story. There were also problems found in financial activities connected to the estate. Investigators found that documents had been altered even before Gene's death was officially confirmed. Someone had already tried to gain access to his money and estate. All signs pointed to a deliberate and calculated plan. Police continued to dig through the timeline and data. The pacemaker's final recording gave them a fixed point. From that day onward, there were no signs of life from either Gene or Betsy. No phone calls. No internet activity. No banking or purchases. Nothing. It was like they had vanished from the world. But that wasn't the only clue. Security footage from a nearby house captured someone lurking outside Hackman's home. A car was seen parked on the street for long periods. A shadow moved past the front door, though no one actually entered the house on camera. Inside the house, motion detectors recorded small movements at strange times, too small to be made by a person, but not matching the dogs either. Even stranger, logs from the home security system showed that the doorbell had been turned off and on several times. Still, no emergency services were ever contacted. Hackman had a very routine lifestyle. He walked his dogs at the same time every morning, picked up his mail, and took care of regular chores. Suddenly, all of that activity stopped without warning. The police traced his last known online search, his last typed message, and his final phone call. All of these ended abruptly, as though something had interrupted him mid-action. A new piece of evidence came from cell tower data. On the night before the pacemaker stopped, an unregistered phone signal had been detected near the house. The number was hidden, bouncing between towers to avoid being traced. It was clear that someone had been there that night. Whoever it was, they knew what happened before the authorities did. Betsy Orokowa should have called for help if her husband was having a medical emergency, but she didn't. She also never left the house, even after he died. She didn't contact any family or friends. When police checked her bank records, they found only one transaction on February 16. It was small and seemed unimportant at first. But in hindsight, it was the last digital sign of life from her. That meant she also died that day, one day before Gene's pacemaker stopped. The most important question now became, who had been watching them? And why? Police focused their attention on someone who had the access and the motive. The surveillance activity had raised suspicion. The timeline didn't match what Leslie Ann had claimed. Now it was time to find out what she was really hiding. At first, people knew very little about Leslie Ann Hackman. But now, every detail of her life was under the microscope. Investigators began comparing the strange timeline with footage and call logs. They started questioning her whereabouts. One big problem was that Leslie had claimed to have been out of town during the time her father died. But location data from her phone showed she had been nearby, and possibly even near the property. Further investigation into financial records revealed some troubling actions. Attempts had been made to access Hackman's bank accounts, even before his death had been made public. Legal documents connected to the estate were discovered with forged signatures. Changes were made to the names of beneficiaries and financial holdings. All of this pointed to someone trying to take control of his assets before his body was even found. The deeper police looked, the more inconsistencies they found. It wasn't just the phone records or the security footage, it was also Leslie's behavior. She had not reported her parents missing. She hadn't tried to contact them, despite claiming she spoke to them regularly. In fact, she had avoided calls from neighbors and family members who were concerned. When asked why she didn't check on them, she gave unclear and inconsistent answers. Police began to suspect that Leslie may have known her father and stepmother were already dead. The digital trail didn't lie. Her device had been near the house on multiple occasions when she claimed to be far away. She hadn't spoken to either parent after February 15, yet she said she had. And her financial activity showed that she may have benefited from their deaths. When confronted with the evidence, Leslie struggled to explain the contradictions. She insisted she loved her father and had nothing to do with his death. But the facts were too many to ignore. Surveillance footage, GPS data, and digital logs all painted a different picture. Whether or not she was directly involved in their deaths remained uncertain. But it was clear that she knew more than she was saying. Authorities continued to build a timeline based on digital evidence, bank transactions, surveillance footage, and witness statements. Every hour between February 15 and the day the bodies were discovered was examined. The focus remained on what Leslie did and didn't do during that time. She had the opportunity, the motive, and the knowledge. Whether that added up to guilt or just a series of bad choices was still being decided. Experts say that in the world of criminal investigation, sometimes the absence of action is just as telling as action itself. Leslie's failure to report, her misleading statements, and her questionable behavior created a pattern that couldn't be overlooked. Investigators are still trying to piece together whether her actions were criminal, or if they were the desperate attempts of someone overwhelmed by loss. The case of Gene Hackman and Betsy Orokowa's death remains one of the most haunting in recent memory. What seemed at first like a natural death of an aging couple turned into a deeply complicated mystery. A mystery that suggested secrets, surveillance, and maybe even betrayal. While the truth is still unfolding, one thing is certain: the story is far from over. And the most shocking answers may still be waiting to be discovered. At first, it looked like just a very sad story. Gene Hackman, a Hollywood legend, and his wife Betsy Orokowa were found dead inside their Santa Fe home. At first glance, nothing about the scene seemed violent or disturbing. People thought it might have been a quiet, tragic accident. But as investigators started to dig deeper into what really happened, things stopped making sense. The calm, peaceful scene began to reveal signs of something much darker. A mystery was unfolding, and it led straight to Hackman's daughter, Leslie Ann. When Leslie Ann first talked to the police, she told them she had spoken with her father just weeks before his death. According to her, he seemed fine. There were no signs that anything was wrong. He wasn't sick. He didn't sound confused or troubled. Everything, she said, seemed perfectly normal. But the police weren't ready to close the case just yet. They began checking phone records to confirm the timeline, expecting to see the calls she described. Instead, they found nothing. No calls. No texts. No messages of any kind. In fact, the last confirmed communication between Hackman and his daughter had happened much earlier than she had claimed. Her story didn't match the facts. And once that happened, the police had no choice but to keep digging. When investigators pulled her bank records, they expected to find a normal set of transactions, payments, deposits, grocery shopping, maybe some credit card bills. But instead, they found something odd. Before Hackman's death had even been made public or officially confirmed at all, Leslie Ann had already started talking about her father's estate. She had discussed his fortune, and it looked like she was planning for something that hadn't even happened yet, at least not on paper. These conversations weren't private thoughts or worries. These were talks with lawyers. She was preparing documents. And all of this happened while the world still believed Gene Hackman was alive and well. The timeline became impossible to ignore. Legal documents related to Hackman's estate showed changes, things that had been altered recently. Critical facts had been edited. Dates had been shifted. Signature pages didn't match older records. It looked like someone had tried to rewrite parts of Hackman's financial records. And those changes seemed to have started even before February 17th, the day his pacemaker recorded its last activity. That meant someone had either known or believed that Hackman was gone long before the rest of the world found out. The questions piled up quickly. Why was Leslie Ann talking about inheritance before anyone even knew something had happened to her father? Why was she changing legal papers when his death hadn't been announced? Did she know something everyone else didn't? Or was she trying to make sure she got what she wanted before anyone else could act? When police confronted her about the inconsistencies in her story, Leslie Ann became defensive. Her answers started changing. She couldn't explain why there were no phone records. She didn't have a reason for the missing calls she claimed to have made. She stumbled when asked about the strange banking activity. And then, just when it looked like things couldn't get more suspicious, another secret came out. Someone had discussed Hackman's estate with a lawyer on the exact same day that his pacemaker stopped working. At that time, no one had declared him dead. No one had even reported him missing. So how did someone already know? And more importantly, why had they already started taking action? That's when the investigation started to shift. It was no longer just about a mysterious death. Now, it was also about money. About fraud. And about a possible plan that had been in motion long before the world caught up. As the days passed, more evidence began to appear. Hackman's death didn't look like a normal medical tragedy. There were no signs of a struggle on his body. No bruises. No wounds. No broken bones. Nothing to suggest he'd been attacked. The same was true for his wife, Betsy. Her body was free of cuts, marks, or anything else that would point to violence. For a moment, The authorities thought maybe it had been a quiet poisoning, carbon monoxide or another gas that could kill silently. But those tests came back negative. The air was clean. The gas lines in the house were working perfectly. There were no leaks. Nothing toxic had been released in the house. Then, they turned to the toxicology reports. Maybe it had been pills, an overdose of some kind. But again, nothing showed up. No drugs. No alcohol. No barbiturates. No overdose. On paper, both Gene and Betsy were clean. And that's when something very unsettling came to light. There was medicine that should have been in the house specifically for Gene Hackman's heart. He had a known history of heart problems. He had gone through treatments before, and doctors had prescribed him medication to manage his condition. But those prescriptions were missing. Not just misplaced, gone. The bottles weren't in the house. There were no refills. No receipts. No leftover pills in drawers or cabinets. And that wasn't normal. If he had simply stopped taking the pills, there should have been extra doses still left in the house. If he had run out, there should have been records showing he refilled them or at least tried to. But there was nothing. It was as if someone had made sure the medicine wasn't there. That discovery changed the way investigators viewed everything. What if Gene Hackman hadn't died because of something that happened to him, but because of something that didn't happen? What if someone had deliberately withheld the treatment he needed to stay alive? This wasn't a dramatic murder scene. It was something more quiet and more chilling, a slow, planned lack of care that led to a silent death. They started asking similar questions about Betsy. She had medicine too, yet none of it was found near her body. If she had experienced a medical crisis, why hadn't she taken her pills? Why hadn't she called for help? Was she too weak? Or had something or someone stopped her from doing so? Suddenly, the missing medicine looked like more than just bad luck. It looked like evidence of a plan. And that plan had one obvious goal: to take control of everything Hackman owned. The next step in the investigation made things even clearer. As soon as Hackman's death became official, there was a legal battle over his estate. Millions of dollars. Properties. Investment accounts. Movie royalties. All of it was now under question. And very quickly, Leslie Ann's name appeared on nearly every document. The will was a mess. Important pages were blank. Other parts had been altered. Signatures didn't match. It was clear that someone had been tampering with the documents long before the death was officially known. Records showed Leslie Ann had already tried to change parts of her father's estate before the public even knew something had gone wrong. Her lawyers didn't deny it. They admitted she had tried to change the estate documents, but claimed she didn't mean to break the law. But the documents told a different story. Someone had moved large sums of money. Someone had submitted legal forms to adjust inheritance rules. Someone had met with lawyers, quietly, secretly, while Hackman's death was still a mystery. Now, it looked like she had been preparing for his death as if she already knew the outcome. This wasn't someone reacting to grief. This was someone planning ahead. And it wasn't just about money anymore. It was about timing. About intention. And about betrayal. The legal fight turned into a full investigation. Prosecutors started building a case. They looked at the timeline again. The missing pages from the will. The early financial moves. The offshore transactions. All of it pointed in one direction: Leslie Ann. And the more they looked, the worse it got. That's when police placed her under full surveillance. 24 hours a day, they watched her movements. Her phone calls were monitored. Her emails were tracked. Her financial activity was logged. And the truth came out quickly. Bank records showed large sums of money being moved in and out of accounts. Some of the transactions were split into small pieces, tiny amounts designed to fly under the radar. But when added up, they totaled millions. Some of that money went to banks overseas. Hidden. Untraceable. And worst of all, these transactions started before Gene Hackman had been confirmed dead. Emails showed her talking to lawyers about estate matters as if everything had already been decided. It was like she had been preparing for a future she already knew was coming. Even the phone logs showed her reaching out to financial advisors and trying to fast-track legal paperwork while the public still believed her father was alive. The final blow came when forensic experts uncovered the real financial trail. Secret accounts, backdated documents, hushed-up transfers. It all pointed to one truth: Leslie Ann had been working behind the scenes, planning to take everything her father owned. And she had started before he had even died. The evidence was undeniable. Her fingerprints were all over the case, on the legal documents, the bank records, the hidden accounts. What started as a quiet tragedy had now become a criminal case. It was no longer about mourning a Hollywood star. It was about justice. The police arrested Leslie Ann Hackman. She was charged with multiple crimes: financial fraud, theft, obstruction of justice, and tampering with legal records. Her arrest made headlines. It stunned fans, friends, and the media. The courtroom was packed. The trial unfolded like a slow-burning thriller. Every piece of evidence showed a pattern of lies and greed. The missing pills. The changed documents. The quiet money transfers. It was a plan that had taken months, maybe years, to build. But it had fallen apart completely. The verdict was swift. She was found guilty on all major charges. As a result, she lost all rights to her father's estate. Every penny, every property, every piece of the Hackman legacy. It was all taken away. Her name was permanently removed from the inheritance. And the judge didn't hold back. In court, he called her actions cold, calculated, and devastating. But even after the sentencing, not everything felt settled. People still wondered, what really happened in those final days? Did Gene Hackman die because of a carefully planned act of greed? Or was Leslie Ann simply taking advantage of a tragic situation? Had the full truth really come out, or was there still something we didn't know? Some questions may never be answered. Some secrets might stay buried forever. But one thing is clear: the fall of Leslie Ann Hackman was a warning to everyone. That even behind the calmest faces, the deepest betrayals can hide. What do you think really happened to Gene Hackman? Was it just a tragedy or something much darker? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Another video is coming up next, don't miss it. Have a good day.